Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm David Duarte, your host for today's episode of Culture Before Content. We're excited to have you here with us on the Music for All podcast network. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, for their incredible and ongoing support in making this podcast possible for everyone tuning in. At Music for All and within our entire Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. We hope this podcast offers inspiration, ideas, and support to everyone committed to making a lasting impact on their students' lives through the power of music. We bring our guests in so they can bring their success to you, and I get a chance to learn. It's great. But let's dive into some final details before we bring on our guest today. So first, thank you for being here live on Facebook or YouTube, or maybe you're listening later. I don't know. We'll find out. But we'd love to have you be a part of the conversation. Post some questions, post some thoughts, share your thoughts, interact with us in real time if you are here. If you miss any part of the broadcast, don't worry. You can catch up the full broadcast right after. The audio versions are also available on Mondays through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. But for more details, just head to musicforall.org/podcast. So let's talk about last week for just a little bit. We had Dr. Tanya Mitchell-Spradlin from Penn State. Awesome. She emphasized culture as the foundation of a successful music program. I love the fact that she focused on her students, and she believes in fostering student agency, inclusivity, and leadership by giving students the ownership to create open dialogue and personalized connections through music. She values building relationships and engagement by guiding students to connect with their roles within the music critically. Her approach centered on creating a safe space where students felt empowered, respected, and connected. It was super refreshing. Ultimately, it would enhance their musical and professional growth, and she was so good at speaking. Anyway, check out last week's episode to hear Dr. Mitchell-Spradlin's insights directly. All right, enough about the pre-show. Let's get to the show. All right, I am so excited. This is somebody I have wanted to talk to for a long time. I know I've posted back and forth, some Facebook messages, and he's been so nice to actually respond to them. And so I've wanted to bring him on for a long time. Randall Standridge is a full-time composer and marching arts designer. A lot of us know him. In addition to his career as a composer, Mr. Standridge is the owner and editor of Randall Standridge Music. He is in demand as an arranger designer for the marching arts, and he lives in Jonesboro, Arkansas with his husband, Stephen, and their very, very spoiled pet. So please welcome to the show, without any further ado, Mr. Randall Standridge.
Hello, David, and thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Seriously, I remember the very first time that I got in contact with you, because you became like a composer extraordinaire right at the time I went to the district office. So like right when you came onto the scene, when you go to the district office, you know what you stopped doing? Listening to music for your band. And so I ended up conducting the All-State Band in Arizona. And I think, and don't make the face, but it was Adrenaline Engines. It was on there. And that was the first time. And all the directors like, have you met Randall? I'm like, I have not. I don't, and so that was like my inspiration. I think I sent you an email. It was a long time ago. Like 12 or 13 years ago. But that was my introduction to you. And then all of a sudden, Facebook came, and you have just been an inspiration to us about culture. I even saw it today about an hour ago. I was just, checking, make sure you're coming to the show today. But you have been a huge person on the scene about culture. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. So thank you for being here on the show today.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure.
So what are we going to talk about, Mr. Standridge?
Oh, we can talk about whatever. One thing I always tell people when I go to, band director workshops or anything is I am probably the least shy person you'll ever meet. Typically people will ask me questions, and my caveat is always, I don't promise you'll like the answer, but I will answer any question, which has always led to some really fun and sometimes unexpected conversations, both with directors and students. Most recently, for example, I had the very good fortune to spend 2 weeks in Australia, working with bands. Yeah, that was a lifelong dream. It was one of these things like, one of those times where I just had to ask myself, who am I and when did this become my life? Because you've got to keep in mind, one thing I put on Facebook a lot, but I mean this. I mean, I am just a little country guy from Arkansas. Like, I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. I was a teacher in a very rural district. So going from there to representing our country and our band culture here in Australia, was just something that I had never been on my radar. But it led to a lot of, really fun conversations there. Of course, one of the biggest questions I got there was, dude, how did your arms get so big? So, because, I had to tell them, from what I understand, the gun show would not be allowed here in Australia. So,
yeah, that's right. They banned those there.
Yeah. Talking about biceps, by the way, for those of our listeners that can't see the gesture I just did.
No, that's amazing to me. And so, like, what's really been fascinating about watching you, go from band director to composer is your insights have been super good for all of us. I think sometimes you are like that voice in my head or all of our heads to remind us as band directors of the things that we should probably do. And you are super, like, you've got nice start of the year messages. You've got some you always have those messages out there. And I know you've been doing a lot of honor bands since you've been a composer. I know a lot of your work. I've got 3 of your works coming up on my next concert. Now that I think about it, I don't know why Christmas came. So it's because you start doing all those Christmas things. But what are some of the things that you noticed? Because like your message seems to have resonated much louder now that you're a composer. But when you transferred from band director to composer and just being a Facebook presence, I really feel that's when you started getting your message better across for all of us. I mean, so what do you think about the message? I mean, what's like the current message you're wanting to spread right now?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about just how that all started, I mean, I do think the music came first. And, that's how people got to know me, was through my music and through that. And I think that just kind of piqued their interest into what I had to say on Facebook. So I don't think it was just the Facebook messaging itself per se, but I don't know. I've got a lot of thoughts and I've got a lot of feelings about education, about life. For those of you that might have, followed some of my posts or, my personal information that I put out there, I've had some pretty traumatic events in my life, both personally and then with teaching. And I feel like that's given me some perspective. And I'm definitely, with having a teacher's heart, if anything I can say can help somebody or, just offer them a different perspective, then I'm happy to do that. I will also say that, this year marks roughly, let's see, it's 2024. So I've been out of the classroom as a teacher for about 11 years now. And one thing I've definitely noticed during my time away is just how easier it was to gain perspective. I think sometimes when we're teachers and when we're in that classroom environment or when we're in a district or when we've got responsibilities to meet and it's just so go, 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 it's a little bit difficult sometimes to take that step back and really kind of see the bigger picture because we're just thrown into it so immediately. So it's been a pleasure to, just kind of give my thoughts and things. And, one thing too, I make sure that I visit schools every year so that I don't lose that connection to the classroom. I mean, I remember what it was like to be a teacher. I still interact with teachers daily. And, I know, as we would say, the struggle is real,
Well, I think, also too, you said something already is that, you've taught in small areas, rural areas. And I think sometimes our messaging, especially those of us from the big towns, we forget that we're probably only like 20% of the bands out there. And there's so many rural communities, so many small schools that are not getting the attention. And the fact that that's kind of, where you live and where you're from, you can bring some of that message. And so, some of the things that always occupy my mind are how do some of these small schools and that isolation, mental health is such a big part of this. And there's so many people out there that are isolated in these smaller communities and just finding a way to connect them is always hard. What do you say to the rural band director about, being by yourself or being alone? What's some advice you have there?
Well, I think the biggest advice I would have, and this was a lesson that I definitely had to learn myself, was to temper my expectations, which is not to say, not to expect excellence, not to expect things like that. But, if we look at the bands that are celebrated, if we look at the bands that are always put on, YouTube, on that are just really, it's, that go to Midwest, that go to Wibbick, that go to things like that. It's traditionally, it's going to be, these larger programs that have just an amazing and very fortunate amount of resources. But as you said, that is not the reality for the large majority of band directors and band students across the country. I mean, take my program, for example, that I taught in. I spent all 12 years that I taught in Harrisburg, Arkansas, which is a small town of roughly a little bit over 2,000 people. And for my band program, for 8 of those years, I was the only band director. I mean, I was the beginning band director. I was the middle school band director, the high school band director. I taught 5th grade recorder band. I also taught music appreciation, and that was my day every day. The last 4 years, I was very fortunate to finally get an assistant director, but even then, it was, just one assistant. Meanwhile, some of these groups that are really celebrated, you'll see, that they'll have, a huge director staff plus adjunct faculty teaching. And I'm certainly not disparaging those groups. I think it's wonderful that they have those opportunities and resources. But, if we're talking about how do we help the average director, I think you have to approach it more from people who've had something similar to my experience, because that's going to be the large majority of directors across the country.
Yeah, and I think we forget that. And speaking of a small program that does wonderful things here in Washington, Ilwaco is over on the coast. But I would love to ask a question: what advice do you have for a high school student who is looking at starting to compose, and where to start?
Well, so a couple things with that. I think, I am so envious of students now that are starting to compose in their high school, because I started composing when I was very young, but this was before YouTube. This was before all of the resources that are available now. Like, I mean, I was literally like doing sheet paper sheet music, writing it out and having to guess a lot of things because I couldn't even hear my stuff played back to me immediately like we can now with Finale, MuseScore, Sibelius, and everything else. But so my best advice right now would be, number one is to write music that is authentic to you. And what I mean by that is just write things that you're interested in. Don't write to please other people. So like if you're interested in writing symphonic band music, write symphonic band music. If you're interested in writing jazz, write jazz. If you're interested in writing rap or rock or EDM or whatever, that's what you should focus on. The second thing I would say, and this is something I run into with a lot of young composers, is, don't try to reinvent the wheel. And here's what I mean by that. For example, like if let's say that somebody's wanting to learn to write band music and they try to write a concert march. Okay, I mean, you don't have to reinvent the march. The march works just fine. We got the intro, we've got the thing, like that. There's a structure that's expected, and yeah, you can play around with that, but I mean, it works just fine the way it is. The same thing, like for people who are starting and they want to write pop music. I mean, my advice to somebody who want to write pop music: write 2 verses, a bridge, and a chorus. Like that's what you need. So I think sometimes, young composers, they're so excited and they're so like, I want to, do my own thing. They forget that there's already a lot of great, music in place that we can imitate and that we can, take from. One of the things that I don't think a lot of people know about me, for example, for people that know my music is very eclectic. One moment I'm writing the next chapter of the Santa the Barbarian series, but then, in another, I'm writing a very serious piece about mental health. And then I might be writing a march, or I might be writing an overture. I mean, I'm or a piece, like Fracas, that is based on, jazz and rock. So my tastes are all over the place. I think for me, it came from a place of imitation at first, because I actually got my start as a professional composer being a marching band arranger. And the thing, I think when you start with like if you just start as a composer, the expectation is, oh, you're just going to write, whatever style it is you're writing. When you are a marching band arranger, you are expected to write everything. And I mean, I was writing a lot. Like it was nothing for me to write 10 to 20 shows a year. And so I would be writing, Broadway music, jazz, rock, rap, country music, movie score, symphonic, and then mixing all these things. And so I had to get good at all of those styles and learn to imitate very quickly. So for me, I think, my particular compositional viewpoint comes from a place where, if I am trying to emulate a certain style, I don't feel like I need to completely reinvent that. Now, of course, I mean, I will also write things where I'm trying to create something new. But I think in the modern day of composing, you can do both. You can emulate things, but you can also create things. And I think sometimes finding the sweet spot between those is what makes someone really successful. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I'm actually curious now because like when you started composing at a very young age, I would assume. And so
Oh
when
yes.
did you? And so like for me, like I became an arranger on accident. I was writing stuff for my marching band section in my college, and then my director went to a university. Next thing he knows, he calls me. He goes, "Hey, can you write something out?" I'm like, "I don't know." So I like you, I wrote things out on paper, had no idea how it sounded. So he sent me the first recording, and I was in shock because I had never heard. I just knew chords were chords and things, and I knew ranges. But how did you get when did you get a chance to hear your music, or who played your music at first? Because I know that for my young composers, I will encourage them to write stuff, but I give them a venue. Like, did you have a venue when you were young?
Not a big one. One of the first things I wrote was a drumline cadence for me and my friends when I was in ninth grade, and it was called Randall's Radical Rhythm, which we just called RRR. And so I was able to hear that because I mean, a drumline thing like that's not hard to put together. You just we get together, we learn it, we play it. It's fun. Bigger things like band things. The first time I ever got to hear a band play anything I wrote was when I was in college. But now leading up to that, this was when, like Finale first got on the scene, other notation programs. And so when I got to college, one of the first things that, I was able to get was a copy of Finale from my composition teacher. And so that changed my world because suddenly being able to input music and then hear it back, even though it wasn't a real ensemble, it was still invaluable to just be able to hear, how things work. Now, going ahead of that, I was very fortunate to have some some band directors in at university that would play a couple of my things and let me hear them, and that was great too. But I really did not get to hear my music a lot before I got into writing for groups.
That's the thing I found out with Finale back in the day. Like with the first time, if it sounded good on Finale, when it went to reality, it sounded 10 times better. And that was like my secret to figuring out some of the sounds and how to make it sound better. It was like when that became alive, I was like, that changed my whole vision on how to write, listen, or even score. Did you do any type of like imitation or like any type of like ear training with your composition? Like, how did you learn some of the? I mean, because everyone has their tricks on what sounds good. Where did you get some of your tricks from? Or so not? I guess tricks isn't right the word, but whatever.
Well, that's right. Well, and like I said, for me, I think a lot of it was imitation at first because like I would listen. If I was trying to write a marching band arrangement, I would listen to other marching bands and be like, okay, well, why does this sound like this? And just try to figure out that voicing, that scoring, and things like that. The other thing is my experience with music, like how I started learning music, was kind of odd. I learned mostly by ear at first. This was before I joined a band or anything. I mean, I was very young, and I have two older brothers. I am the baby of the family, and so I have two older brothers, and my middle brother in particular is a really great musician. And when we were growing up, he was learning to play guitar, and so our parents one time got him this electric piano because they're like, oh, well, you like music, you might like this too. But he was definitely a guitar guy, and he messed around with it a little bit, but I mean, the guitar was what he really loved. So there was this electronic keyboard just sitting there, not being used. And so I started kind of picking out, things I'd hear on the radio, movie songs I'd heard, things like that. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was teaching myself how, musical dictation, musical ear training, and things like that. So what was funny was like, by the time I got to band, when I joined band, I was actually a pretty good musician. Like I could play a lot of stuff, but I couldn't read anything. Because I mean, and that was really my impetus for wanting to join a school music program in the first place. Was I was like it was a free way to learn how to read music.
So like now that you've been composing a lot, and you're right, you've been changing. I mean, you've been writing many more things, and you know some of your projects out there are super helpful. When did your arranging or your composing, I should say, not arranging? When did your composing get to more be focused more on the things that you wanted to do as opposed to just wanting to get your music out there? Because I think you've got messaging, you've got things that are great for styles, you've got things that are great. When did what you know? Tell us about how you've grown through the years.
Well, I mean, I don't think it really like changed all at once because, and I will say, I think one of the best things that happened to me was just by happenstance, which was the first major publishing company that I got hooked up with was Grand Mesa Music. So the editor there, you know, Walter Cummings, who is just and the owner, he's such a great guy, and one thing I have come to learn to love about them and what we did with her is, you know, like there, and I'm not going to be so gauche as to name certain catalogs, but you know how it is, like there, and I understand this, like with certain commercial catalogs, there will be expectations, like we need these type of pieces, we need to hit this marker, we need to hit, you know, hit this type of thing, and there's like boxes to check off. In Grand Mesa, one thing I will always praise Walter Cummings for there is that there was none of that. He would just publish the best music that, or what he felt was the best music he'd received for submissions for that. And I mean, the styles were all over the place. You never knew what you were going to hear coming from that catalog. And I thought that was very exciting. And so, since that was my first major touchstone, you know, I wasn't forced to write overtures. I wasn't forced to write marches. I wasn't, you know, I was kind of given free reign. And so, you know, so if you look back at some of like my earlier pieces, I mean, yeah, I've got some things that are a little traditional, but then you've got things like Snake Charmer or things like Pandora, or things like that that probably would have gotten well, actually, there's no problem about it. They were rejected by other major publishers, but you know, Grand Mesa took a chance on them, and so so early in my career, I was already given a little bit of, you know, free reign in terms of that. But then as I, you know, went through my career both as a teacher and as a composer, I think especially for me, when I first started writing band music, even with that freedom, there definitely was this preconceived notion of like, well, this is what band music sounds like. And the further I got into my career, and I will also say, particularly when I did my master's in composition, something about that experience really changed me. And I stopped viewing band music as a genre and started just viewing it purely as a medium. And so what's funny is if you look at like 2009, 2010, which is when I was finishing my master's, if you were to, you know, line up my pieces chronologically, you will see a big like shift during that particular time. Towards, you know, it's a little bit more experimental, a little bit more pops influence, which is something that I'm definitely interested in is, you know, how does the pop idiom interface with symphonic tradition and band tradition and things like that. So, I mean, that's something that is kind of a recurring, you know, theme throughout a lot of my catalog. So, it became that. And then of course, as I got further in my education career, I was writing things that I thought my students needed. But I wanted to make it fun, you know, because to me, there is nothing worse than when you get a band piece or, well, any piece, whether it's for orchestra, band, or whatever. And it just sounds like an etude. Like you don't, you know, we were talking about like, advice for young composers. Make sure your music first and foremost is entertaining to listen to. Like, you know, because, you know, if you're going to teach a concept, that's great, but do it in an entertaining way where it's not just dry.
Right. Well, see, now we're going to start talking some other stuff here. Cause now I'm ready. Now I think I'm warmed up to where we're at. So you write music of all grades, right? You write from
absolutely.
Grade, you know, and that's the other thing too. And this is where I want to get the conversation. Cause I talk to band directors all over all over. I work for the marching band circuit here because I wanted to meet people, not because I love working for your marching band circuit, but I really want to meet people. And that's the best way to meet judges, best way to meet people, see who's doing good work out there and go, oh my God, this band is fantastic. But anyway, I got talking to a band director the other day, and I try to give my advice here and there. And I always tell people, don't listen to my advice. It just evaluate it for what it is. And that's it. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm trying to tell you what to do. And we got into this advice, or I got this conversation about how hard to program the freshman band. And I'm not going to say this, I looked at them and I said, I would err to the lighter side and not to the higher number. I would spend more of my time teaching with my music as opposed to music doesn't matter to me. What the music teaches is what matters to me when I'm working with those freshman bands. And that's one of those things I keep trying to tell people is how you program. It doesn't matter whether it's a grade 1. It doesn't matter whether it's a grade 4. It doesn't matter whether it's a grade 5. And so this goes back to programming and the things that, like, especially your compositions are great for, is like, sometimes I'm like, that is a rhythm that I need to teach to my band, and I can work on that. But your music speaks to us, and I can go listen to your music. What is your thoughts on programming for like say a freshman band or even a middle school band? And, because I've got band directors say, well, if it's not a grade, blah, 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 I'm not going to play it because it's not teaching my kids. And I'm like, you don't have to challenge the kids. You can challenge everyone. It doesn't matter what grade. Let's take your take.
Well, for me, programming, especially for educational ensembles, I think, it's way harder to program well for that age group than it is for like a university group or a professional group. Because, at that level, you're just pretty much thinking of what do we want the concert experience to be, as opposed to, this visceral, like, this is what these kids really need to learn, So number one, for me, when I would go through programming for a year, I would, literally make a chart of the concepts that I wanted to teach. And then I would start trying to find pieces that fit those. Now, within that, of course, then I'm also looking at, is the piece entertaining? Is it something I feel that the kids are going to like? And here's the big thing, and this is a beef I have with a lot of
I like
educational music. Is okay. So this piece introduces a concept, but does it introduce that concept for everybody? Because, like, it's one thing to say, oh, well, this piece introduces 16th notes. But if the woodwinds are the only ones that have it, then it's not introducing 16th notes. And I think I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder with that too, being a percussionist, because, we are the only group in band that are ever asked to sit out regularly. And so, to me, if we're looking at like educational groups, it's very important that, whatever gets taught be for everybody. So I look at it those ways, both in the lens of, is it going to be entertaining? Is it going to teach the concepts I want? Now, having said that too, I want to address something else you said about, directors that only look at grade levels. I just think that's tired. I think that's a tired argument, because to me, one of the things too is, we're teaching these students these valuable musical skills, and sometimes it's fun to just put down a slightly easier piece and just let them have that faster success. Now, not all the time, obviously. I mean, we need to challenge them and we need to push them, but sometimes you can back it down and just have that fun moment too. One experience I had in college that I think was great was our university director, Dr. Tom O'Neill, would, in wind ensemble, we're playing grade 5, grade 6 music, we're playing high symphonic things, but usually once a week we would sight read some grade 2 and 3 and sometimes even grade 1 literature. And he was very explicit about why he was having us do that. I mean, number one, he just said it's fun. He said, number two, he's like, most of you are never going to program grade 5 and 6 music with your bands. He's like, but all of you will be able to use this grade 2 and 3 music, and I want to make sure you know some music at that level that's good, And so we did that. But I think including a easier piece is great. Here's another thing that if I had my entire career to do over again, here's one thing that I would absolutely do. And to all the directors listening, you need to write this down, because not to brag, but the advice I'm about to give you is gold. You don't even have to agree with it, but I am telling you it is gold. one thing I would go back, and I did this, I will say I did this my last 2 years, and it was a huge success, but I wish I had done it the other 10. Was that at every concert, whether it was a Christmas concert, even our festival, preparing to go to what's called assessment or festival or contest or whatever, no matter that, whatever concert we're getting ready for, I always included pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Now, a lot of times, like if we had more serious stuff to work on, it would just be easier things. Like if we're working on our festival thing, it might be, like if our festival music was like grade 3, grade 4, the pop stuff we're working on was probably going to be grade 1.5 or 2. But I always did that. And my thinking on that, and what really turned me around to including that in the programming, was, we needed, I needed, especially in a rural area, I needed to make my class relevant to the students, because the kids enjoyed band and they enjoyed my teaching. We had a good thing going, but how does this actually relate to their real life? I mean, most people don't turn on their radio and hear, Declaration Overture by Claude T. Smith, which by the way, is one of my all-time favorite pieces ever. But they're not going to hear that. They're going to hear pop music. And if we want to keep them invested in, instrumental music and in their instruments and in things, I think we need to meet that part of their need too. So that's something I did late in my career, and I absolutely recommend it to everybody. It did wonders for student enthusiasm. It did wonders for retention. That's something I cannot emphasize enough.
She beat me to my question. What is your favorite pop piece to perform grade 2.5 to 3?
If I had to pick my absolute favorite, it would probably be, and I cannot remember the arranger. I apologize. It's a long time ago. There was this arrangement of music from Chicago, from the movie Chicago, or the musical, that my band did, and we loved it. Like it was just, because it was fun, and it was challenging too. But I really enjoyed that. Also, I'm not going to lie, I love Christmas music, like in general. If I could pick my dream job, honestly, I would be just a composer and a arranger for a Christmas orchestra, and just do like one big concert a year. Like that would be, because I love Christmas music.
Maybe that's why I have 3 things programmed for you on my next concert. 2 weeks away. Yay, Christmas in October. Here we come.
There you go.
At least the reading part. But like, maybe name some of your latest pieces, because the thing about talking about music is not everyone gets a chance to hear it. And this is like something like just spreading the information. What are some of your latest pieces that you've written that have the pop influence or pop music to it?
Oh gosh, everything. I mean, because and when I say pop, I mean, I don't necessarily just mean like pop music. I just mean like pop culture.
Right.
Because for example, like the Santa the Barbarian series, it's not really like pop music, but there is this like, movie score, narrated character kind of quality to it. Some of the other ones, one of my favorite new ones, is this piece that's very personal to me, which is called Stay. And it's part of my Unbroken project, which is a musical initiative I started a few years ago about mental health. This piece, Stay, in particular, it was important to me for a lot of reasons. One, because the Unbroken project, I've been very open with the public about my own struggles with mental health and my family's struggles, because it runs in our family. This is something that is just part of our reality. But one thing I had never been completely honest about, with all the things about the Unbroken project, was my own experience with suicidal ideation. Which, and I know it's funny to just kind of say that and just say it as if I just told you I had eggs for breakfast. I mean, because it's like, I know that's a very heavy subject, but with my particular disorders, like that's part of my life experience. So I wrote this piece called Stay, that was based on an incident that happened a little over a year ago. I was actually, at Universal Studios with my best friend. We were having like a buddy trip, and we were in line for one of the rides, and on somebody's back, they had this shirt that just said, "Hey, to the person behind me, the world's better with you in it," from the person in front of you. And I got so emotional reading that. I mean, because it just really affected me, because I don't always feel that way. And so it just got me thinking, like, how many band students, how many of our students and teachers, quite frankly, for that matter, walk through the band rooms every day, and they're just never told, you're important, what you do matters. And, what, we want you to stay. We want you to be here. And I'm certainly not naive enough to think that that is the only thing that would make a difference. I mean, ultimately, and to anyone listening, I want to strongly emphasize this enough. If you're having any kind of mental distress, or you suspect you might be living with some type of condition, please get help. And I've been very fortunate to get help throughout my life, and it's made all the difference. But going back to what I was saying about that is I wanted the piece to resonate with our younger people, and also with myself. And so if you listen to Stay, it really sounds almost like a pop ballad,
Right.
perfectly fused with the symphonic tradition. So that's if we're talking about pop, and I think that's one thing. The other chip I've got on my shoulder too is anytime anybody invokes pop or pop culture, I think there's this automatic assumption, oh well, it has to be easy, or it's trite, or it's loud, or something like that. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I think you can make serious statements while still evoking this pop sensibility.
And so we got, Waco, thank you for the Unbroken Project. Can you speak just a little bit more about what your Unbroken Project is for our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. It started with this commission I got from the Arizona College Band. They just wanted a grade 5 piece, and they told me to write whatever I wanted to. So I wrote this piece called Unbroken, which is a musical depiction of the experience my family had with my mom's mental health, particularly this year where she had a mental breakdown and was institutionalized. After that experience, before that experience, I mean, my mom's a great mother. My parents are amazing, but we would, just see these kind of cracks in the facade of her, and just moments where she was very upset or where she was a little bit erratic, but she wasn't getting help. After this experience, when she came out of being institutionalized, she had therapy, she had medications, she had all these tools that she had needed, quite frankly, for most of her life, and she was great after that. So I got to see somebody with their mental health out of control versus somebody who had the help they needed. And so I wrote this piece to kind of celebrate her experience, because after that experience, she has been very vocal about her own experience, and she's very encouraging to other people and very, just open about sharing this in the hopes that it will help other people. So I definitely get that part of my personality from her, which I will always be grateful for. She's really an amazing person. And so I wrote that piece to celebrate her and kind of her messaging. And then from there, I realized, that I had written this grade 5 work that I loved, but the problem with it was that it was a grade 5 work. And so, kind of like what we said earlier in the podcast, a lot of groups are not going to be able to play that. So then the task became to create other works that were at different grade levels and kind of touched on different things, so that other ensembles at younger ages, or with, that might not be working on that advanced literature, would still be able to have this experience and talk about these issues. So that's where the project started.
I just think that's amazing. And I can't thank you enough for like bringing these things to the front for people. Cause I am a big believer that if we don't talk about it, we're just going to hide things. And you never know when that words out of someone just change your life. I mean, there's just things you spoke about that t-shirt that just resonates, because and we do this with our children every day in school. You might say something that you do not realize that kid needed to hear that day. And so like, greeting your kids every day, thinking something positive to say in your classroom every day, even if you just have to remind yourself, is such a powerful thing to do. And I was also going back to the pop music thing. Matter of fact, it was one of your pieces that I heard, and I actually programmed it speaking of Wibbick, one of the honor bands did Deus Ex Machina on the concert, and it was just life-changing to hear. It was done, first off, so well. All the electronics that got, I just found that to be so inspirational. I brought it home and we did it with the kids, and it was one of those moments that if it wasn't for me hearing that in a live situation, I probably would have thought it would have been too hard for my ensemble, but it was like perfect perfectly just right. And then you introduced me. You probably don't know this. You got me into sound engineering and figuring out all the sounds and all this engineering stuff. I bought it. Like there's one right there. I bought the keyboard to go with it. I learned how to program. Man, Ableton Live is hard. I'm just throwing that out there. But I had such a good time learning that process. It inspired me to start a music production at my course at my school, because I got so into it. I thought, man, this is something kids need to have. Like kids want to do that kind of stuff. Create their own music, create beats, create all that stuff. But let's continue on with some of the music things. So other things, because like, oh, look, there's exactly what I want to talk about. You have free stuff. And some of your free stuff, I think just people don't know about. Like you have some crazy free warm-ups. You got crazy Christmas stuff. Can you talk about some of the things that you offer? Just because I know that's, again, it's how it gets the connection to you and then the things that you do. But what are some of the things that you offer for free?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we, if you go to our website, randallstandridge.com, and there's a tab at the top that literally just says free stuff. Some of the things you can find, our thing that's been downloaded the most is our warm-ups, which are which have a really fun name. They're the handy dandy Randy Standy concert bandy warm-ups. And we actually just about a month ago did a major expansion to them, because originally they were just kind of a bare bones warm up but things that I think groups need to warm up on, the long-term goal was always that we were going to add different modules to these to kind of expand on them. And we just recently did that. So it went from like 2 pages to 14 pages. And of course you don't have to do all of it. But there's different sections for like, what are you trying to hit with yours? And we're going to be adding more onto it throughout the, next several years. Honestly, by the time we're done with it, it's probably going to be the length of a really good like warm-up book.
Can I make some requests?
Sure.
Request. Chorales in all 12 keys, more access to more chorales in 12 keys. That is my lifeblood. Because the other thing too is, you as a composer, you could write the like open harmonies versus closed harmonies in 12 keys. I think that'd be fabulous.
Oh yeah. Well, and we did just add a chorale module onto it, because originally in the original warm-up there was like one chorale. Now with this new module there's several more. So yeah, we'll definitely take that into consideration. We just, we're trying to expand it kind of organically and make sure that it's hitting a lot of needs. So some other things that we have on there, we have some melody sheets, because one of my big, thoughts about music education is that any music student, their primary touchstone with music is melody. Like, what do we learn growing up? We learn Mary Had a Little Lamb. We learn Happy Birthday to You. We learn, the ABC song or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And, when kids come into our classrooms, they're very excited about melody. And that's what we typically, start them with. So I created these things that we call Yetudes, which are collections of different melodies from our pieces. And they're for free. They're on our site, and it's just something for people to use to play melody. Because I mean, let's be real. Like, if I were a tuba player and I wanted to get excited and play something for mom and dad or aunt and uncle or whoever I live with, it's not going to be bump 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 or even worse, a series of whole notes. It's just so. I put these out in the hopes that it would give kids something to be excited about and to go show off, and not just be stuck in, oh, I'm just a section player. Because my goal with, my band was that at some point, like, even if it's just for themselves, they would, play like a soloist. And, that's something I really strongly feel we lose over time. Like once we get kids out of beginning band and going up through sections, sometimes I think the kids lose the excitement about music because they're relegated to only playing section parts. That's why I think melody is important. That's why I think chamber music is an essential component of a really well-rounded music program. And just us as directors offering our students these opportunities to play melodies. Similarly, we also have a Christmas play pack, a Hanukkah play pack. We have a free arrangement of the Star Spangled Banner, free arrangement of Pomp and Circumstance. We have a free Christmas parade tune. It's an arrangement of In Chelsea's Deo. So we've got, and then we have like 3 drumline cadences. Yeah. So we tried to put, like, for me, when I was thinking of free stuff, I was like, what are the staples that, the average band director would need? and then let's just put those out there.
All right. I like these controversial things that are going in my head. Like I hear you speak. I'm like, oh yeah, let's talk about this. So I got things in my head like competition, concept of sound. And then my third one that I just thought of that you mentioned was percussionist in a band program. How many times do we ignore our percussionists growing up? And you as a percussionist can probably speak to this. And so like what I've noticed is I actually have a percussion class. That's the one thing I will fight for. I will go to my admin all the time. Like, okay, I have 50 kids in this class. Give me that class of 10. It averages out to 30. I'm actually saving. You still got my point two. And we're all good. So I am spoiled in the fact that I can teach my percussionists one-to-one. Advice for the middle school, high school band director about what to do with percussion besides sit back there and do nothing.
Well, I mean, I think this goes back to what we're talking about programming. If you are in a situation where you have a percussion class, I think you can be a little bit more, free with what you program in terms of, in terms of programming something that, doesn't have a lot of percussion or things like that. But if percussion are part of your class and they have to be in there, as good as some of the music that has limited percussion is, and because keeping in mind, I'm a composer and there are several pieces that I love. But my duty this is how I feel. My duty as a director is not to my ego or to my particular tastes about what I want to program. My duty is to those students. And somebody sitting in the back being told, listen to this, and you're going to learn as much as somebody that is actually physically playing is not good music education. And that's just how I feel. And I will argue with anybody about that. So, if you do want to program something that doesn't use a lot of percussion, I think, as long as you are finding ways to engage the percussion, whether it's, if you have an assistant, have the percussion working on a percussion ensemble, have them, doing more things like that. I think that's fine. But the sitting, allowing them to sit back there, because first of all, you're asking for trouble. And I'm speaking this like, I love my percussion fam, but there is a reason that in the Muppet Show, Animal is the wild one. That's not by accident. Jim Henson nailed that one. If you want, the band version of Lord of the Flies to occur, just leave your percussion alone for a bit. So, I think there's a lot of reasons to keep the percussion engaged, so that's just how I feel about that.
And then will you be writing more percussion ensemble pieces? Just popped up. That's
yes, I will. I currently have 3 published with our company. Let's see. Right now we've got Furry Lees, which it's for those of you that know the Beethoven Furry Lees. This is not done like the typical, but it's a little quirky, a little fun. We've got another one called Tycho, which is a grade 3. It's a really, really fun one for 8 percussionists, I think it is. And then we have another one called 3x3, which is a percussion trio for either 3 found instruments, or it does have specified ones if you need something specific. So yeah, I am planning on writing some more. The big problem right now is just finding time, because I am, and this is not a brag, this is just my reality. I am just buried in commissions right now.
Oh, and no.
It doesn't leave a lot of time to just take on, side projects. Having said that, I do have a couple of percussion ensembles I've finished. I just haven't published. They're sitting on my computer ready to go. So hopefully soon, because I do enjoy writing those, but it's a matter of time.
Well, that's actually a good question too. Cause your composition. So I'm pretty sure you're probably just either faster or more efficient, I should say. I don't want to say faster because it's really not about the speed of getting things done. How long does it typically take you to conceive, create, by how long is start to end of a project for you? Because you put out a lot of works during the course of the year. Where are you? You say I've got a lot of things on my plate. I'm like, wait, we want stuff for the masses too. I'm kidding, but I'm just saying. But how long is your creation cycle in general?
Oh, it varies wildly. I get asked that question a lot by students and directors. How long does it take you to write a piece? And the only honest answer I can give is until it's done. But just to give you some examples of the range of what I'm talking about. So I wrote this piece that's become somewhat popular a few years back called Mechanical Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people will believe me when I tell them this. Mechanical Monsters took me 2 hours to write. Because like when I sat down, I knew exactly what I wanted to write. And I also like, I am very, very good at finale, although that's a whole other subject.
That was my next question.
Yeah, that's a whole other subject because I'm having to learn Dorico right now. But for the time being, I'm very fast at finale. But so I was able to write that very quickly. But then like for complete contrast, I was so happy and so lucky 2 years ago to be commissioned to write my first symphony for band, and which I did, and it is my favorite thing I've ever written. It's called Symphony Number 1: A Ghost Story. So for since we're in the Halloween time right now, it's not to self plug too much, but I mean you can listen to it because I'm not trying to sell you anything. You can listen to it for free on YouTube, on Spotify, on Pandora, on Apple Music. But that symphony took me every bit of 4 months to write, of almost nonstop work. I mean, I did have some other things I had to do, but I would dedicate minimum like 3 hours on it a day, for that entire, and sometimes way, way more than that. So, so you've got 2 hours versus 4 months, like is the range. But if I had to say on average, I would say on average, a really good piece of music takes me anywhere from 2 to 3 days to write.
How do you balance all the pieces that you have? Like, I mean, how many are you typically working on at one time? Is it like one piece and then I got it and I'll put it, or how good are you at transitioning from going in and out of works?
I usually try to focus on one piece at a time. Now, having said that, like if I get a good idea, or if a good melody or something pops in my head, or if I get an idea for another piece that I'm kind of tinkering on, of course I'll stop and do that. But I do find it's more efficient to really try to just focus on one thing at a time. And I will say also, just on a more practical level, that's largely going to be dictated by deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, typically I'm working on whatever's due next just to get it done, and that way I'm not stressing myself out too much.
Yeah, and like I said, like I personally love just like every time you have something that comes out, or like, and again, if you don't follow Randall on Facebook, you're missing out, because not only do you get mental health strategies, you get great advice on being a band director, but you also get access to the music that's great at the time, because that's I think I'm chaotic enough to go, hey, there's that, oh, I want that piece now, I want that. And so like I find it just like tracking and listening, it really helps me as a band director.
Yeah.
So like kind of. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's funny you say that, because I've been reflecting lately. And I mean, if you really went back through my social media posts for the past, 6 or 7 months, I have really not been posting a lot about my music.
No.
And that's been, it's something I'm kind of having to deal with right now, because I think this goes back to mental health too. But, and I know this is going to sound like the poor me's, but, somewhere along the last year, I allowed some other people on social media, some directors, some composers, to kind of dim my light a little bit. And given that I deal with anxiety and all these other things, it just gets amplified. And so I've gotten a little self-conscious about sharing about music. I mean, not to poo-poo too much on your listeners, or because I mean I've made a decision, like this week, because I was really thinking about this weekend, about how like this is just dumb. Like it's dumb for me to allow other people to dictate how I feel about my music. But so I'm going to start posting about it more. So, and I do still post about it a little bit, but just not like I used to. And that's something that I'm just having to like get back into, because I had really convinced myself for a while. I was like, nobody wants to hear about this.
Well, in my opinion, it's whatever you post just connects me to your music. It doesn't have to be about music. It's Randall Standridge. And I think that's what it is for me, is because I almost like, I think I just crave reading your advice, or just seeing what you're there. Cause like I said, right now, as we're in marching band competition season, you always are posting some things that band directors need to hear, like, about the competitive aspect, or about being okay with, and again, you're right. There's great ensembles out there. I'm not trying to negate anything that's great about those fantastic programs, but we all have to do band our own way. That's our own success, and let that fly and be happy with it, and be, self-reflect that we're doing the right things for our program. And if we don't have that, find access to more resources to get help. But oh my gosh, I'm looking and going, we've been talking for 55 minutes, and I really dislike the fact that I figure I can talk to you for hours and just keep getting some more things. So let's think about this from a sage advice thing on our last reflective thought here. Just general advice for all the band directors out there. What's on the top of your head? What is the final Randall Standridge?
Well, if I had to give two things of advice, one would be for directors themselves, and then the other would be about their programs. So first, just to the directors listening, so the biggest thing is I want to tell you, you have to be your own best advocate in your life. And this goes beyond just the job, although the job is certainly part of it. But, you do not need to sacrifice yourself to the job. And this is a recurring theme that I have seen in my travels, across the United States, in other countries as well. Music, you will almost not find a community that is more dedicated to their craft than music educators. But that is also a double-edged sword, because sometimes we lose sight of the life we have outside of that. For example, when you were introducing me, it says, he lives in Jonesboro, Arkansas with his husband and their very spoiled pets. I have to remind myself a lot that, I am more than a composer. I'm a husband. I am a pet owner. I am a friend. I am I've got interest. Like, for those of y'all that can see the video thing, like, I've got a PlayStation back here. I'm a video gamer. I go to the gym a lot. I am a person beyond my job, and I try not to let my job define me. And so to the band directors here, the first sage advice I would say is just be sure you're taking care of the whole person. Okay. Aside from just the band director persona. The second thing, now, when it does come to the program, everything should be about evolving your band within the means that are available to you in your program. How do you, like, for example, bands that are competitive. My band was competitive when I taught. We went to several marching competitions, concert festivals, things like that. But one thing I will, it was always fun, for when we won, it was fun to win. And, that was great. But one thing we always tried to keep in mind, and I learned this from my band director in high school, Ron McCone, who is one of my biggest influencers, in my life, because he was just such a great director. It was never about winning. It was about the love of music, and it was about how do we improve from yesterday to today. And so I think and I know that sounds so cheesy and so simple, but I really think if you keep the student experience and the student growth at the forefront of the decisions you're making, then you will make good decisions. Like I said, when a lot of the things we've talked about, the including pop music, which to me improves student experience and improves student engagement. If we think about, making sure students are playing melodies so that we're, developing them beyond their roles just in the music that, we're preparing. And if we think about, percussionists, making sure that they're engaged and that we are caring about them as students and as developing musicians, as opposed to tools that we are using to prepare the music that we want to play, which unfortunately that's how, some are viewed. Then I think if we keep the student experience and the student growth in mind, that's going to make us make good decisions.
Well, thank you. Oh wait, I have one last question. It's a quick one. What's your current video game? That's what I want to know now.
Oh, my current video game? Well, right now I am, it is the Halloween season, and I am like, Halloween is my favorite holiday. Like, I love I love scary stuff, scary things. So I am right now playing this creepy little indie game called let's see, Poppy Playtime. And it's basically like you're in a you are a former employee of this toy company who has returned for reasons unknown, because it's a video game, and you're going around and there are old toys trying to kill you, because what is more wholesome than that? So so that's how I'm getting my creep on. But I'm right now I'm playing that, and I'm also just got through playing Legend of Zelda.
The latest one, or that new one?
The latest one. Oh my gosh, Tears of the Kingdom. I kept wanting to call
Oh,
it. Breath of the-
there's a new one that just came out.
Oh
Like
no,
last
yeah,
week.
yeah, I know, I saw that. I haven't got that one yet.
Me
But that
either.
is on my to buy list. Yeah, no, I make time for video games every day, even if
So
it's
you
just
have
for
a
an hour.
Switch too.
Oh yeah, I
I
have a
see how
Switch
you
and
roll.
I have a PlayStation, and then I also have my computer which I play Minecraft on. So yeah, I am a
Oh, yeah.
rabid video gamer.
Yeah, so am I. So I have my Xbox.
Actually,
the only,
let me tell you my favorite video game right now because it's not even one of those. So I just recently bought myself a MetaQuest 3, like the virtual reality headset. And with that, and if you'd have told me like this is going to be the best VR game, like I would have. So the best VR game ever is Walkabout Mini Golf. And it's literally just like playing mini golf in this virtual reality. And by the way, you can online play that. So any directors there, if you want to play me at mini golf on Walkabout Mini Golf, hit me up because I am addicted to this game. It is so much fun.
See, I should connect better through video games because I really like my bands. We do video game one night, and it was just last Thursday. And so it's funny you talk about. I was being chased in something by these creatures. My kids put these headsets on, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I got to go back.
Was it Dead by Daylight or Phantasmagoria?
Dead by Daylight.
Yep.
Yep. Anyway, I'm sorry I saved the best question for last. But to our listeners, randallstandridge.com with 2 L's if you're not the RANDALL Standridge.com.
You can do that, or you can also do randystandy.com, and you can also do toomuchpercussion.com.
You could just push R's and S's into Google and it'll probably pop up as one of the top. Just you can misspell on the internet all you want. It seems to work out. All righty, Randall. Thank you so much for coming today. You are amazing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I loved it. All right, audience. Thank you for tuning in today's episode of Culture Before Content. Wasn't that super fun? I don't know why we got the video games at the end, but I had a great time. And again, thank you to Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, and to Music for All for making this podcast possible. And before you go, don't forget to share the episode on your socials and tell a friend. Let's keep spreading the word. And you can catch all the video or audio podcasts on musicforall.org/podcast. I hope to see you next week. And thank you for coming. Have a great weekend and bye-bye.
Bye.